Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening, Sarah. Good
Well,
evening.
welcome back to part 2 of our little coronavirus and lockdown questions and answers. It's very good of you to join us again. How have you been this week? Have you had a good week?
Not bad. Got a bit to report. Last week I was giving some advice about not watching too much media. Well, I was about 90% successful doing that.
Right.
The advice about not talking about the pandemic, I had a bit of difficulty. So I suppose the message for everybody watching is just try and stick to the guidance I gave. Select a time of day to watch some media, but make sure that you just cut off after that. Just stick to taking in the facts and try and find other things to talk about. There are lots of other things going on in the world.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then big news for me anyway, personally, and my family, we had the vaccine today. We had the BioNTech vaccine. And a big message to the membership and to anybody else who's listening, please get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated. Don't listen to the scare stories. This is an effective vaccine. Vaccine science goes back a long time. Goes back to, the discovery of the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we've eradicated a lot of illnesses because of vaccination. It may be with this one, and this seems to be the latest science, the latest advice from all the experts seems to be that this virus is going to hang around, and we'll probably need to have a vaccine topped up like we do with the flu vaccine every year. But it's for me, it's it's a momentous day because this vaccine is great news for us all.
Yeah. And any side effects at all?
No, I haven't had any side effects so far. I mean, I haven't got a sore arm. Some people get a sore arm. Some people feel a little bit off color for a few hours, perhaps the next day. There's plenty of advice given when you go and get the vaccine. And I have to say the vaccine centers are so clean and perfect. And there's so many people looking after you, all socially distanced. You mustn't worry about going to a vaccine center. They're superbly run. You get a leaflet with all of the things that you might expect, but don't forget, people with all kinds of health conditions have had the vaccine and, they do well. Yeah. You do hear stories about people who become seriously ill after the vaccine, but you have to bear in mind that it takes the vaccine a good couple of weeks before you start to get the immunity. Yeah. So there are some people who unfortunately can catch the virus in that window of time. Yeah. So you've really got to stick to the rules. And even once the immunity is bedded in, we still have to stick to those rules about social distancing, hand washing, hands, face, space. They're the clear things, because it's not just us. We've got to look after everybody else.
Everybody else, exactly. Which leads me on to the first question that we've had this week, in from a lady that says she's been told that it's all a conspiracy. Should she actually believe that there is a coronavirus?
Well, yes. I mean, the daily figures that come up, they're true. I know by first-hand experience of dealing with patients, it's true. I've got a daughter who's up to her ears in a regional hospital where the intensive care unit has had to double in size. I had a good friend of mine, Stanley Mutsatsa. Some people who are watching might know him. I got news of his death last night. Devastating. A fit man, a really fit man with no apparent underlying health conditions, who's now dying. No, it's certainly not a conspiracy. No. It's certainly not a conspiracy.
No. How does coronavirus actually spread? Somebody wants to know, can they actually pick it up by simply going into a supermarket?
The key thing is that it's a condition that gets picked up by breathing in the virus. So you're close to someone and you breathe in the virus. You can pick it up from your hands if you touch a heavily contaminated surface. But the key thing is hands, face, space. So wash your hands, keep space from other people, use alcohol gels. I mean, by all means, you know, when your shopping comes, do wipe it down. But the evidence seems to be that actually viruses don't do well on that kind of surface. But once you've introduced some sanitizing gel or some simple antibacterial wipes, that gets rid of the virus. And then once you've done that, wash your hands. Really important. Keep washing your hands.
So basically, it's safe to go shopping, but just stick to the guidelines.
Yes, I mean, at the moment, the lockdown rules are that where possible, you should just stay at home. People have to work. People have to take exercise. That's really important. And there are other emergency reasons why people have to leave home. So yes, shop online if you can. Personally, odd things I go into a supermarket for, but I wear a mask. And once I've done my shopping, I put it in a bag. I come home. The first thing I do when I come home is wash my hands.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Yes, lockdown. We've been in lockdown now for a period of time. So why is the situation still getting worse? Why are the figures still going up?
Well, we've got new variants, you know, the briefing we had from the UK Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientist said that there is some information about the new variant, but it's too early to make really definitive judgments about how bad it is because the data is only early. So listen to what Sir Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty said. There's been some scare headlines, you know, that the new virus is doing all kinds of dreadful things, but I think you have to listen to the experts. We have to rely on our chief scientist and chief medical officer. And yes, the new variant certainly is more transmissible. There seems to be no doubt about that. It's getting worse. Other variants, but we get variants with all kinds of virus infections. There's a multitude of reasons why it's getting worse. Some of them we understand, some of them we don't. But while it's going on, it seems to me that there's no alternative but to have us doing what we're doing, staying at home, keeping safe, washing our hands if we go out. Yes, I mean, I don't think you can do any more than just keep on repeating the simple guidance.
Yeah. Okay.
There is one thing, Sarah, which you and I have discussed and has cropped up, and that is the effects of lockdown on our bodies. And the thing that most concerns me is that the message about vitamin D, which all governments have put forward, but it's kind of got lost. If you think about people who've been locked down throughout the summer, people who've shielded, people who've been housebound because of their anxiety. We make vitamin D in our body through sunlight, and we do so between about end of April to September. Now, other than those times, the sunlight, even if we're out, doesn't really give us that vitamin D that we need. The other thing is, vitamin D is found in meat, dairy, produce, etc. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, you're getting virtually no vitamin D. So the advice is take a supplement. You don't need to take too much. 10 micrograms is the kind of stable dose. Go to your pharmacist, get your pharmacist to give you advice. If you go online, find the low dose, cheap options. They're all good. The key thing about dosing yourself is to avoid the high potency ones, because vitamin D is stored in fat. So if you keep taking more than your body needs, it will accumulate because it's stored in fat, and you can get some really nasty side effects with that. So vitamin D, because if you're short of vitamin D, if you're too short of vitamin D, you get an illness called rickets. But most people who are vitamin D deficient don't realize that they're vitamin D deficient. So you can get tired. Any depression you've got is going to get worse. You might get more anxious. There's a whole range of
Yeah.
so-called minor symptoms, but they're not so minor actually once you suffer them. So take a vitamin D supplement.
Yeah.
If you take the 10 microgram supplement, take advice from your pharmacist. If you've got an outstanding medical problem, you should seek advice from your doctor or your practice nurse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great
So
advice.
sorry to interrupt you,
No, no,
Sarah,
no,
but
no, not at all. That's great advice. Great advice.
it's an
Yeah,
important public health message.
a very important message that's been coming out. Yeah. Okay. So another thing that crops up quite a lot is people with death phobia. The COVID obviously has made it a lot worse. You know, people writing in or ringing in and saying they're absolutely petrified. Their thanatophobia, which is the correct term for death phobia, has got, you know, 100 times worse. They're worried about dying themselves, but also about losing a family member. What can people do with this phobia at the moment? What can they do to ease things?
Well, I suppose to start with, I'd rely on my clinical experience, and I've seen a lot of patients over the years who presented with thanatophobia, death phobia, and it's caused terrible, terrible suffering, behavioural avoidance of all kinds. But I've also, obviously, having worked as a health professional, and I worked in palliative care for 5 years, so I was part of a team that looked after dying patients and their families. So I know that death is not far from most people's minds. And apart from people who are, you know, obviously phobic, there are all kinds of anxieties about death which are there under the surface. And actually, I can think of some research of health professionals who are very well versed in all the science, etc. Their levels of health anxiety and death phobias are there. It's in the background. And it's something we don't talk about. We don't talk about. Now, I'd say that what you've got to try and do in a sense, if you have that phobia, is to deal with one of the sources of the problem during lockdown. And that is that you have lots and lots and lots of time to think about it. And you're bombarded by media accounts and really gruesome accounts on television. Now, I think the simple advice that I gave last week about minimizing the amount of exposure you get is really important. So that's number one. I think also talking about it and talking to family members and friends, which I know people with death phobia do. They ask for reassurance. I think the third thing is to say that, or it might be the fourth thing to say, is that people with death phobia actually amplify the risk. Now, we're all going to die one day. But what is in the heads of people with death phobia about themselves and about their family is an amplification of risk. So sadly, in the UK, 600,000 people die every year. 100,000 people might die of coronavirus. So there are 500,000 other deaths which are attributable to other things. So death is inevitable, but actually, if you look at it in terms of population, and if you look at it in terms of keeping yourself safe and sticking to the rules, if you're a normal, healthy person, you know, the risks are going to be small. Obviously, they increase as you get older and with, you know, complex underlying health conditions. But I think the amplification of risk is the other thing. Now, that's a bit more tricky to give advice on, but I would say that you will reduce greatly your death phobia if you restrict your exposure to all the death stories, and if you restrict the amount of time you speak about it. And I suppose at the back of that is trying to make a plan for each day, so you have a lot of diverse activities, because anybody with an obsession needs, that obsession will grow if you give it time to grow. So if you don't give it time to grow, it's not going to go away, but it's not going to get worse.
Which exactly covers all phobias. Yeah. I think we could definitely do a question and answer on that subject in the future, definitely. Okay, and the last question that I've got for you this evening on to do with the subject of the coronavirus lockdown, etc., is the people that have had OCD with the hand washing. Before the pandemic, we've had many people write in. Before the pandemic, they were washing their, non-stop. They felt that there was a certain amount of people felt that they were making progress, but this has just there again taken them back. I mean, it touches in a little bit with the previous question, the phobia, etc. So what would you say to people that are finding themselves washing their hands too much, on and on and on?
Right. Okay. Now, a lot of specialists in OCD treatments, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, have thought about this, and it's obviously a problem in the sense that you can't tell your patients to go out in the street and behave as normal and touch everything and get near people and just expose yourself to, for example, a fear of germs. Now, in this climate, in what's going on at the moment, that's an impossible thing to do.
Cool.
So if you kind of take things back, a lot of hand washing will take place at home. And a lot of hand washing that takes place at home is not linked to exposure to coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
It will be linked to all kinds of other things, such as a fear that if you don't wash your hands, for a certain length of time in a certain way, that something dreadful might happen to someone. Mm. You might have a hand washing problem, which is linked to a phobia of dirt, the dirt in your own home, which has been untouched by other people. So I think there should be a focus, if you can, on response prevention. Now, we know that the most effective treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder is exposure and response prevention. Now, you can't do the exposure, but you can do the response prevention. So if you're compelled to hand wash, one of the things that you can do is just say, I'm going to delay the hand wash for 2 minutes, and I'm going to see what I think in 2 minutes time, see whether my anxiety has come down. So rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10's the worst anxiety. If you're feeling 9, I've got to wash my hands, wait 2 minutes, wait 3 minutes, do something else, look at your phone. You might come back and find out that rating has gone from 9 to 7. Mm-hmm. So then you might think, right, let's give it another 2 minutes. So it's exactly what we would do as Spanish and do. Then that would be the approach. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I can only give this advice remotely.
No, that's great advice. And there again, I'm sure that we could do in the future a question and answers on this subject alone, I'm sure. Thank you, Kevin, so much for the questions. Did you want to add anything else before we close it?
Well, the only thing I wanted to add, Sarah, is I think it will be extremely useful to have these short sessions, 20 minutes or so, on perhaps a weekly basis for the foreseeable future. And I know that both of us are busy, but I think we both see our contributions as being a priority. So let's get together about this time next week and see how we go.
It's fine with me. And of course, if anybody wants to write in and let us know, future topics, etc., please do. I won't get the address wrong this week. It's sarah@nopanic.org.uk. Okay, so if anybody wants to write in and let us know subjects, please do. Thank you so much, Kevin, once again, and have a good week.
Just to say, Sarah, thank you very much for all the efforts you put into convening these meetings. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.